Good morning. So we're having a few technical difficulties, but that's what events do, isn't it? Hey, Jonathan, how are you, sir? So welcome again. One thing, and Steve, I'm glad he stayed up here, and everybody always thanks Steve nicely, and I've heard people in the hallway thank Steve nicely, but having worked on State Wireless and helped start this back in 1999, and to watch it grow to what Steve really kind of had the vision, I just want to specially acknowledge and say thank you, Steve, for bringing over 1,000 people of what grew out of about 24 people 23 years ago. So, please join me in thanking Steve for the hard work. And it truly has become a production. So, before we get to Ed, and Ed, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I can see you. Can Ed hear me, Steve? Can you, Ed? You can? Hi, my friend. How are you? Before we introduce Ed Parkinson as our keynote this morning, and his apologies he sent. He was supposed to be here live, and something came up last minute, as it always does when you work in D.C., it seems. So, but he still is going to do his presentation and his keynote. And one of the things that Ed had the opportunity to do 2 years ago now, Mayor? I guess 2 years ago, is Ed came down from Washington and met with Williamson County's mayor and had the opportunity to view one of the most impressive 911 EMS centers, I would say, Ed, that you've probably had the opportunity to see anywhere in the country. So there is, Williamson County has a 911 EMS center, and Mayor, if I'm not getting this right with the story, that I think was really birthed out of the 2010 flood that all of us that live in Tennessee remember. And it really came about, and it turned into this 56,000 square feet, $28 million building that was finished back in 2016. Is just really state-of-the-art. But I think what it says for us, it really speaks to the importance we share in what government does and first responders and what FirstNet is doing. And Ed will talk a little bit more about that. But I do want to introduce, and I thank him so much for taking a few minutes, and he has such an understanding and an interest and a support of what our industry does in wireless to really not only just connect his community, but save lives. So please join me for about 1 minute, and Ed, I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear him, but Honorable Mayor Roger Sanderson from Williamson County.
Well, thank you, Pat. As always, when you follow people, you never know what the first person is going to say, so you took half of my speech, so that cuts it down to about 45 seconds. I'm glad to be here, and thank you for the success, Pat, Steve, Ed. Looking forward to hearing your comments. Public safety is very important all throughout the state of Tennessee and all of the South and throughout our United States, but particularly in Williamson County, public safety was our number one priority, or it became the number one priority in 2010. We put 45 people together and asked them to be together, city, county, fire chief, police chiefs, all across the board, and said, without regard to money, that will be my job, develop what you think we need for the next 20 years to be sure that we're serving all of Williamson County and throughout the Middle Tennessee area. Those 45 people came back about a year later, a year and a half later. It was during that time the 2010 flood came about, and we were able to take it to our council and get approval for that. Certainly the flood put it on the cusping of how things are done, but it was important for all the municipalities and the counties to develop that. Our latest element into that is that what happens when all of your products go down, that there's a terrorist act. I'm an old military boy, so that's important to me to not only build schools and the things that we need, but also look at what happens when everything goes down. How many of us still can do the SOS, the Morse code? And so now we have that capability within our own public safety building, then when everything goes down, and it could, then we have the ability to be able to communicate with the people that need to be communicated with on that first line of defense that we have to offer. And all of that is a result of the public safety that we're developing. Our residents in Williamson County, such as Steve, they don't know all of this. That's just what they expect of government that's run like a business. Congratulations. Thank you for allowing me to say a few minutes. Come on down to Williamson County. It's only 15 minutes away, and spend some dollars. We can always use them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. You may want to sit so you can see Steve. I mean, just so you can see his presentation. Oh, can you right here? You can see it right here, Mayor. So Ed, again, welcome. We're very sorry you're not with us in person. So I'm going to just turn it over. Ed Parkinson serves as the CEO of FirstNet, and I think we all know exactly what they stand for and the great job that they're doing, not only in our industry, they've made an impact, but what they're doing all over the country to save lives. So Ed Parkinson, I'll turn it over to you, my friend.
Thanks, Pat. I appreciate that. And Mayor Anderson, sorry to miss you in person today, but it's wonderful to actually, believe it or not, speak to you today from an office. What a novel idea in 2021 after the past 16, 17 months. It's great to see that we're re-emerging, isn't it? But a group of people who never stepped away are the folks at the Williamson County EMS 911 Center and at all of public safety over the past 15 months. They've been out there on the front line working for all of us, making sure that they're running towards the fire, looking at the danger in the eye. And it's amazing to be able to be part of an organization like FirstNet, who are here to serve one group and one group only, and that's public safety. So, Pat, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. Mayor Anderson, appreciate your comments, and thank you to all the men and women who are out there as part of the public safety community, serving all of us here across the United States. I just have a few slides here to provide a quick update of where we are from the FirstNet program. And just as really a reminder to kickstart the process, it was born out of the attacks of 9/11. And it's pretty astonishing to think we're just a few months away from 20 years since those attacks of 9/11. I'm sure we all remember where we were on that morning. And it's remarkable to see where we are as a nation and, frankly, the progress we've made across the board for public safety, not just in the communication space, but throughout the industry. But again, coming back to FirstNet, the 9/11 Commission report in 2004 recommended that radio spectrum be set aside for public safety. And it took Congress a little bit of time, but an act they did. And in February of 2012, the FirstNet Authority was created through legislation passed by Congress. We then spent the best part of 2 to 3 years really focused on two main areas, engaging with public safety to get their feedback so that we could then ultimately bring their information and data into the second part of that, which was developing our procurement, the RFP, which went out to tender. And then ultimately in 2017, after a vigorous process, AT&T won that 25-year contract. And this is a 25-year, $47 billion public-private partnership between the federal government, that's my program, the FirstNet Authority, and AT&T, who kicked in networking as well as their own cash and their expertise in going out there and operating the system. We then had a series of engagements throughout 2017 where we engaged with governors and public safety throughout all 56 states and territories. And if you haven't been, we were from the northern tip of Maine all the way out to American Samoa, which is one of our furthest territories, just a couple hours away from New Zealand. And it's remarkable to think that the FirstNet program touches every American in between. And ultimately, that then led to all 56 states and territories choosing to opt into the system, which then ultimately led to the deployment beginning and where we sit today in 2021 with our upgraded roadmaps and our investments beginning in earnest, which we'll come to in a moment. But how the system worked in terms of actually deploying the network. Today, we use existing AT&T towers that are out there and band 14, that's the dedicated 700 megahertz band that is licensed to the FirstNet Authority. That's been run up the towers, and so as AT&T has deployed additional spectrum bands, our band 14 has been run up there too. And then there's been new cell sites. There's been new steel being put out there in every single state and territory, and it's been fascinating to see the speed at which we've been moving. The network's about 94% complete right now, And it's that final aspect of this, the rural parts of the system that do require a little bit more time. But it's been exciting to see where our AT&T has until about March of 2023 to complete that initial build. And that's the initial 5 years of this 25-year contract. And so we have a long way to go in terms of expanding, upgrading, and ensuring that the network can evolve, just in the same way that you and I have changed the way we use, our smart devices. The way we use the internet 10 years ago, very different to how we use it today. And public safety is going to be in a similar sort of situation. So that's something that the FirstNet Authority has to continually engage with public safety to understand how it works and where they need it. And here's the snapshot of where we are today. We've got about 2.2 million connections on the FirstNet system, over 16,000 agencies who have now signed up. And that's remarkable when all those numbers were at zero at the beginning of 2018. We've got over 100 deployable assets. Those include flying cows, the graphic you see there on the top left. We've got a FirstNet 1 blimp that was deployed down in Cameron, Louisiana, after Hurricane Laura last summer. So remarkable to see how that's been able to propagate. It's a tethered device over 1,000 feet high. It can propagate enormous signal strength over an area. And then in 2020, we saw over 750 deployables being rolled out for civil unrest and wildfires and additional pre-planned and planned events, hurricane recovery, tornado recovery, up just north of where everyone is, north of Williamson County up in Nashville. So it's been remarkable to see the diversity and frankly the ingenuity that's gone into the FirstNet program. And all of that was born out of the input that public safety provided us. We've also got over 210 FirstNet ready devices, as well as a suite of applications that are FirstNet specific and public safety specific. These are applications that have been designed by public safety for public safety. And that's unique. They have that FirstNet catalog, which is able to direct the end user to either the Google Play Store or to the Apple iOS Store. And it's fascinating to see how those application and device suites have been growing. I mentioned investment earlier, and I think this is a core part of where we're going as an organization. We're really in the fourth phase of FirstNet. The first phase was to engage with public safety, develop the RFP, then to go through a procurement phase, ultimately then go through opt-in, opt-out, and the deployment. But where we go in the future is very important. Over the course of the 25 years of the contract, AT&T is paying the FirstNet Authority $18 billion for lease of our spectrum that we then, by law, have to reinvest back into the network. And so the way we do that is exactly the same way that we've done all the work throughout public safety. We have to engage with public safety. We have to engage with industry partners, understand what trends are occurring in the commercial marketplace to see if they're applicable to the public safety environment. We then have our roadmap. If you haven't had an opportunity to look at this, go to firstnet.gov and you can download, it's a free download, our roadmap. We updated it last October. We'll probably be doing similar updates in later this year. And it really, in essence, provides a blueprint for where we are going as the FirstNet Authority and where we believe, based off public safety feedback, public safety communications are going in 2022, 2023, and beyond. And then ultimately, we have to make some investment decisions. Really, we have these guiding principles that the board adopted back in 2019, the same year I was able to come down and visit with the folks in Williamson County. It has to adhere to our enabling statute and also has to align to the roadmap, which I previously mentioned. So it's this 1, 2, 3 step that we use and have used to provide these strategic investments. And on screen now, you can see some of the initial investments that we've made. We've expanded our NPSBN, that's the nationwide public safety broadband network, that's the FirstNet system, and we've expanded that deployable fleet. Initially, we had 72 of those cell-on light trucks that you see on the left-hand side of the screen there. We're now over 100 overall deployable assets, including the blimp that I mentioned and flying cows. So the diversity in terms of the assets, based off the feedback we receive from public safety, has been very, very important. We've looked at new types of low weight assets to get them more flexible into much more strategically complicated areas. And so that's an area that public safety provided us the feedback that we knew we needed. And ultimately then we started enhancing our FirstNet core 5G network capabilities. And so we're going to be FirstNet ready. We already have access to some of AT&T's millimeter wave spectrum to provide that low latency, high speed data traffic that we're starting to see in millimeter wave. And we're excited to see the suite of spectrum as well as the capabilities that FirstNet can provide in a 5G ecosystem grow as we move through 2022 and beyond. I mentioned the deployables, and there's a breaking down a little bit more in terms of the numbers. So the communication vehicles, we have CRDs, we have flying cows, the aerostat, as well as the sat coals and couts And this is an important differentiation. Any FirstNet subscriber, those 16,000 agencies, they can request at zero additional cost one of these assets to provide support in critical incidents or for planned events. We're here in Washington, D.C., and 4th of July is coming up around the corner. We have some of those cows and super cows deployed on the mall, ready for, what invariably is going to be an enormous turnout for the fireworks here in D.C. And we have this all around. The Sturgis Motorcycle Rally in South Dakota. We've had these even during COVID relief down in Los Angeles Harbor at the USS Mercy. We had it deployable there, providing communication support. And that's an important part of the flexibility of FirstNet, being able to bring the network where you need it, to increase capacity where required. And the fact that this is at no additional cost for FirstNet subscribers is another differentiation. I mentioned 5G earlier on, and that's a little bit more indication. We're going to be having our access to millimeter wave in 38 cities and more than 20 specific venues, stadiums, et cetera, across the nation. And that's up and running right now. This is a multi-phase, multi-year journey. And I think what's important too, public safety has told us time and time again that they don't want to be the first sort of bleeding edge of technology, but they want to be fast followers. And that's, I think, a very important part of FirstNet, because public safety has to trust the system with their lives. And that's an enormous responsibility that we take extremely seriously at FirstNet. And so understanding how FirstNet is able to bring 5G to the marketplace to leverage by public safety, and understanding the different form factors and use cases for 5G is going to be, I think, an important part of our engagement with public safety in the future, our engagement with industry, to understand how the trends and drivers will drive public safety use in a 5G ecosystem. We've also had an enormous amount of technological innovation. And what we've seen on this slide and the next one that we're going to touch on are just two aspects that are unique to the FirstNet system. So high-powered user equipment, HPUE, is a really important part of it, pushing the edge of the network out, especially in rural communities. And so this is unique to Band 14. We're the only network in the world that has this capability. And to be able to have the assured wireless system you see there and the AirGain Connect device in vehicles to push an envelope and to push the edge is fantastic. We've seen a lot of drive testing taking place in Texas and New York, and the results coming back are very, very encouraging, seeing how the edge of the network, again, is extended dramatically over the course of any sort of use case. And so NIST, who is the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, they keep a certified list of devices that can be used on the FirstNet system, and these were approved just last June. And so fantastic to see how this is being used and adopted by FirstNet. And another important part, which I'm sure is the folks who are involved in 911 will find fascinating, is our Z-Access capability. So again, earlier this year, we were able to provide Z-Access on the FirstNet system. We all can see on our devices where we are from a GPS perspective. That just provides our X and Y axis. How high we are above ground level is very important, especially in the fire community. If you're on top of a 10-story building and it shows where you are from a lat long perspective, but you don't know if you're on the ground floor or the sixth floor, that's a really important differentiation. And so the fact that we now have Z-Access capabilities, it's an application that appears on the phone, and it's one that you see there, the second bullet point, Intrepid Response. It's our FirstNet application. It's a really powerful tool and one that was receiving very, very strong feedback. I report to a board of directors, and my board live all across the country, and they were eagerly anticipating the adoption of this Z-Access. And as I'm sure all of us, including the mayor, with his undoubtedly the vote of public keeping him honest, I too have the similar sort of constituency in terms of public safety and the board, and they made sure that this worked, right? They were using this day in, day out, and it's important to see that differentiation and to understand exactly how it works. So it's exciting to see. We're really encouraged by where this is. And again, we are a world first network to provide Z-Access location on our system. I talked a little bit about the pandemic, and we had over 750 deployable requests that were ultimately rolled out by AT&T. But we saw a dramatic increase in use of broadband capabilities during the pandemic. If you look at the bottom there, public safety used twice as much data as compared to commercial users during the pandemic at the front end. And that's a remarkable use case. A lot of people 10 years ago were thinking, mission critical public safety broadband network, no one's really going to use that. Well, the proof is in the pudding. And I think all of us can agree that the pandemic has done something not only in terms of how we work. I cracked a joke about being in the office in the first place, but again, public safety were on the front line. While we were at home, they were out there, and understanding their way that they're able to communicate, get their situational awareness in their hands is, I think, a super important part of how this works. COVID testing sites and now in vaccination distribution centers have been using FirstNet deployables from day one. And again, to see the flexibility of a FirstNet, how it was used for one scenario that we did not certainly envisage back in 2017 when we signed the contract, and how it's now being able to be adopted for as we emerge from COVID-19 and get back to whatever this new normal is going to be, has been really, really fascinating to see. Telemedicine, rural telehealth, all of these aspects of, I think, the way that pandemic has changed the way that we think about our own health, but also how public safety looks at it, is going to be another important part of the use cases of FirstNet. And we saw that time and time again throughout COVID-19. So it's remarkable to see how public safety has adapted and adopted FirstNet over the course of the past 15 or so months. So really, that's it from my side. I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And Pat, thank you very much again. Thanks to everyone down in Williamson County. It's a beautiful part of the world. I look forward to being there again. I apologize I wasn't able to be there today. And thank you, Mayor Anderson, again for your hospitality last time I was out there in 2019. And I'll pass it back to you, Pat. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Ed. And I'm not sure, Stork, I guess I'll ask. In terms of going on our asset, paying rent, do we look at FirstNet as we have viewed Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile for decades now, that this is an ongoing, and you're 10 years from now, you're still increasing tower cash flow for us. What about the long-term value now to us as asset owners? And I thought, great question. I'm sorry, hang on, we can't hear you yet.
I'm sorry, that's a great question, Pat. Thanks so much. Yeah, I think it's important in terms of comparing FirstNet to the AT&Ts, the Verizons, T-Mos, because that's exactly what we are, right? In essence, we're the fourth nationwide carrier across the United States. And while we're dedicated to a particular clientele, aka public safety, the reach of broadband, the reach of public FirstNet has grown exponentially and will continue to grow. It's also interesting too, and this might be useful for everyone listening, that the global public safety broadband marketplace is really starting to kick off. There's a network called ESN in the UK, one in South Korea called SafeNet. Canadians are looking to deploy, we gather, something similar to FirstNet. The Mexicans have had their Red Compartida project. I just hosted a delegation from Brazil. So what's interesting, the global public safety broadband marketplace is certainly going to be growing. And that's important, obviously, for the devices and the application ecosystem. But coming back to tower construction and everyone who's with us today, the way that public safety operates and thinks is different to a commercial marketplace. Absolutely, their needs and trends will change and will evolve, and we have to be very, very forward thinking in terms of future deployments, future investments, both in terms of coverage, but also other network investments such as core, RAN, whatever it may be. So we have, yes, our $18 billion that we will sit and rely on, but the network will evolve. Of course, there's no ways that we're going to be able to sit still. And I think when looking at future investments, when looking at physical hardware, even software of the network, it too will evolve. And I think that's really exciting in terms of where we sit today on the cusp of 5G. That's going to be an evolution. How that does evolve is really going to be, I think, up to industry trends. And we as FirstNet Authority, we're going to be ready to take advantage of that. And then in turn, I think the community here today should be able to be in a position to offer services across the board.
Right. And I think that's how we're viewing you, as that long-term next entrant and another customer for us. Yeah. Any questions? Ed? Yes, sir.
So, Ed, you mentioned that Z-axis location accuracy is an important new feature for FirstNet, yet so many buildings possibly even the majority of buildings, have no in-building wireless coverage for cellular. How will FirstNet close that gap?
Did you hear
It's
that,
a
Ed?
bit garbled. I know this is a Z-axis question. I got the last bit about closing the gap, the bit in between.
I'm sorry, yes. Yeah, I can't hear you.
You can't hear me either?
No.
I can.
Okay.
Yeah, put the mic closer.
All right. Hi, Ed. Yeah, for Z-axis location accuracy, that requires that there be good coverage inside a building, but most buildings have no in-building wireless coverage. How will FirstNet close that gap?
Got it. In-building coverage, how are we going to close the gap there? I hear you. So that's part of, I think, the vision of what we have at the program. We actually looked at an investment opportunity for providing in-building solutions for public safety. Again, you've got to remember our focus is purely public safety. So when we're talking about in-building, we're looking at fire stations, police stations, very, very germane to that particular industry. We can't go out there and deploy Z-axis capabilities in new construction, for example. That's, I think, the power of the public-private partnership between ourselves and AT&T. We are just but a small part, if you will, of the larger reach that AT&T has. And as the authority, knowing that we have our particular projects and our particular focus, which is public safety, and the 25-year contract with AT&T, there is an incentive for AT&T to provide a solution set and to build that capabilities across the United States in a lot of their marketplaces to ensure that when public safety arrives at a burning building, wherever it may be, they will have the capability, for example, of Z-axis in their devices and in their handsets. So this is a unique aspect of what FirstNet is. There's no other network that has an authority providing oversight over a particular part of a network, and that provides public safety, I think, with greater reach into the commercial capabilities of an AT&T that no one else can provide. So while we're focused primarily on our public safety users and the deployment of Z-axis in those areas, there is the capability of forming stronger relationships with AT&T that public safety then can take advantage of the commercial reach that AT&T has. So again, we're looking at this through a long lens. We've built a 25-year contract for a reason. We didn't want this just to stop in March of 2023. We wanted this to go beyond. And AT&T, I think, bought into that. And so we're excited about that sort of capability. So again, we don't expect to be able to flash in the pan, click our fingers and solve this nationwide. This is part of this phase-by-phase approach that we're looking at 5G through, but it's also the same approach that we're taking to Z-axis through.
Good. Does that help? Does that answer, sir? Okay. I think I have kind of my time frame from Steve. Any more questions? Do you have any? Yes, sir. One more. Okay. Steve said, does anybody have one more question? Anything else for Ed before we let him go? Yes. One more, Ed.
Just to build on his question, is there a time frame for Z-axis capability? Is built into the contract?
Is there a time frame for Z-axis capability?
So it's live now. It's on our website. You can look at some of the FirstNet.com. There's some great capabilities, but Z-axis is operational right now. If you're a first responder and it's available in the markets in which you operate, you can see that all on the FirstNet.com. That's the AT&T-driven website. Ours is FirstNet.gov. And so it's up and running. And it's a pretty powerful tool. I use it more out of interest for a lot of different intrepid response by FirstNet. So it's really exciting to see the capabilities that are out there. So again, it's live, and it will continue to grow across the country as the further expansion continues.
No, and that's a fascinating tool. So Ed, thank you again very much taking time. Hopefully you'll join us next time live. Mayor Anderson, thank you for taking a few minutes on a cool June morning in Tennessee. And Steve, we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Appreciate it all. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.